Afternoon, everybody. Thank you to the organisers for the invitation to come and speak with you this afternoon. Also for the challenge of being at the end of the session, so thank you everybody for staying. And the challenge of the title. So I spent quite a bit of time thinking, what does basic diet, special fad diets and sweeteners actually mean? What does it mean to me, and what might it mean to the people in the audience? So what I'm actually going to talk about is how we get started with food and diabetes management, and some things that from my clinical experience I think we need to think about to help families make the best start. Before I do that, I'd just like to speak to the question that Jamie had about toddlers, because we do the exact opposite. We talk to families about mealtime management, eating behaviour management, and help to enable them to be able to give some, if not all, of the insulin at the beginning of the meal. And one of the things that we know is really important is that you need to understand how much your child needs to eat. And often the fear of not finishing the meal is because there's too much food on the plate in the first place. And we'll come on to that a little bit as we go through the talk. So, as with the previous talks, this is very much based on the newly published nutrition chapter in the ISPAD consensus guidelines. So I have to thank my fellow authors for their contributions. And I'd also like to acknowledge the amazing group of healthcare professionals that I've just spent 2.5 days with at the ISPAD Science School before the meeting started, because there was lots of discussion in that group and they might not realise just how many ideas they gave me to include in this session. So thank you, ladies, all girls. Okay. So the key messages that I want to think about are the application of the ISPAD guidelines, the new updated guidelines from diagnosis. I'd like to take a moment with you to reflect on the impact and the importance of the first impressions that are made when we meet that family with the newly diagnosed child. Why we should be thinking about whole food education at diagnosis. Why we should be building an understanding of food and diabetes management from day one, and how we then think about adapting the education that we give to families to build success. I often hear people talk about the fact how diabetes is really complicated. So we try and give really simple explanations. I'm not sure that simple explanations always help people to understand what is happening and help them to understand what steps to take as they move forwards in the diabetes care and the diabetes management. And I think certainly in the field of nutrition that sometimes putting things too simply ends up with consequences that actually we want to avoid. So I think the one important thing to remember is that for all of us, in any situation, if you were given a diagnosis, what you remember most about the information you've been given is what you first heard. So the message that you hear at diagnosis is going to inform what you do, not just in the coming weeks, but in the coming months and in the coming years. And even now, I still meet families in clinic who will tell me, but we were told to do that when my child was diagnosed. It could be 10, 15 years ago, but they have not been able to change from what that very first information they heard was. So it's so important to get it right. Now, in the UK, we had this big move towards structured education. We thought, right, we'll develop structured education programs and we'll trial them and we'll show that doing all this amazing education is going to make a difference. It didn't. It made no difference to glycemic outcomes. Why? Because we didn't do it at diagnosis. We tried to change behaviours that have been established. One of the studies that was done was the Kick-Off, which was a Daphne for children. And after the pilot study, I took a group of adolescents away on an activity trip in one of those centres where the wall between the staff sleeping area and the young people was so thin you could hear every word that was said. And I listened to this group of girls explain to another group of girls how they'd been on this great course, and what it did was teach you how to eat chocolate, which was not the point of the course at all. They didn't change their diabetes management behaviour as a result of a lot of intensive education, apart from eating slightly more chocolate. So we need to think about those first messages that we give and how to get them right. So starting right. We know that food choices have an impact on glycemic management. We know that it's not just your carbohydrate intake, so we have to think about how we teach about that. We know that if we enable people to understand the glucose responses they see, they are going to be better able to manage. How much time do we spend with a family, the child of diabetes? A really small part of their year. So they need to be able to manage those mealtime glucose responses every single day that they're not with a healthcare professional. So those first impressions, as I've said, they really count. So I come back to the title, and I decided there